The year was 1945. The world was collapsing in on itself. Germany was fighting its final desperate battles, and the Soviet Union was pushing west, inch by inch, through forests, trenches, and cities reduced to blackened skeletons. In the midst of this chaos, childhood became a memory, and war devoured every year it could steal. In the small rural village of Lesnoye, a boy named Mikhail Arsentiev, just 16 years old, stood at the doorway of the conscription office. Snow fell in soft flakes, melting the moment they touched the wool of his oversized uniform. His breath came out as fog. Trembling with fear, he fought hard to hide. His mother, Anna Pavlovna, had spent the night sewing a patch into his sleeve, her hands shaking. She had tried to be brave, tried not to weep, but the tears finally came as she tied a scarf around his neck. "You return to me, older, wiser, not gone." But she knew, as all mothers knew that year, that fate did not bargain. Inside the office, officers barely glanced at his age. 16 or 18, it no longer mattered. The front demanded bodies. The recruiters wrote his name, his birthplace, his height, and handed him a rifle that felt heavier than his entire future. On the train to the front, boys barely older than him hummed scared songs. Others stared blankly into the frost-covered windows. Some carved their initials into the wooden benches, leaving behind the only proof they existed. Mikhail sat quietly, fingers tracing the icon his mother had given him. The train rattled, groaned, and slowly carried them away from childhood forever. Hours later, he arrived at a makeshift camp near the East Prussian border, where trenches stretched like open wounds across frozen ground. Officers barked orders. Veterans glanced at the newcomers with grim resignation, another batch of children thrown into the grinder. That night, lying in a cold dugout with the wind howling overhead, Mikhail realized he was no longer a boy. War had adopted him. By March, Mikhail had learned more about survival than most adults learned in their lifetime. The East Prussian forest was unlike any place he had ever seen. Massive pines stood like ancient sentinels, their bark blackened by artillery fire. Snow fell silently, only to be broken by the roar of distant cannons. The air always smelled of smoke, wood smoke, gun smoke, and the thick, metallic scent of blood that never quite washed away. His unit, the 182nd Rifle Regiment, moved cautiously between shattered trees. They dug into icy earth at night, boots freezing, fingers numb, even through gloves. Hunger was constant, and fear was a quiet companion that never left. But Mikhail learned quickly how to fire, reload, duck, run, how to use branches for camouflage, how to tell the difference between incoming artillery and outgoing Soviet rounds, how to keep his hands steady even when his heart thrashed inside his chest. The veterans watched him with raised eyebrows. He's young, but he's got nerves of iron. One night, during a sudden ambush, a machine gun nest opened fire from the tree line. The barrage was deafening, bullets carving splinters from fallen logs. Mikhail and his squad scrambled for cover as the sergeant leading them was struck and collapsed onto the snow, blood spreading beneath him. Without thinking, Mikhail leapt from cover. He dragged the unconscious man behind a massive pine as bullets whipped past his head. He pressed bandages into the sergeant's wound, whispering, "Stay alive. Please, just stay alive." The attack ended. Reinforcements arrived. The sergeant survived. And from that night on, Mikhail was no longer Molodoi, the young one. He was the boy who ran into fire when even grown men froze. He earned silent respect, the kind that meant something in a place where death was minutes away. But bravery had a price. Weeks later, a shell exploded dangerously close to his trench. The blast threw Mikhail against a tree. He remembered a thunderous crack, a flash of white, then darkness. He woke to the soft glow of lanterns and the muted sound of moans. A field hospital tent, a place where the living were repaired and the dying took their last breaths. His head throbbed, vision blurred, and then a voice. Gentle, calm, speaking Russian with a slight accent. "You're awake. Good. I was worried." Mikhail blinked and saw her. Anna Weiss, a nurse no older than 20, leaned over him. Her hair was blonde, tucked neatly beneath a scarf. Her eyes were a soft, pale blue, eyes that looked tired but still held warmth. She placed a cool hand on his forehead. "You have a concussion. Not the worst I've seen. Your skull is as stubborn as you are." He smiled weakly. She smiled back, just enough for hope to stir inside him. Over the next week, she checked his bandages, changed his dressings, brought him water. They talked quietly between her rounds, about her childhood in Königsberg, about his village, about the way the world used to be before the war turned everyone into soldiers. And slowly, gently, he fell in love. Not with her beauty, but with the way she looked at him. Not as a fighter, not as a tool of war, but as a person. She taught him a few German phrases, laughing when he mispronounced them. He carved her a tiny wooden bird using his pocket knife. For the first time in months, Mikhail felt human again. By the 10th night in the field hospital, Mikhail could walk steadily again. He often helped the medical staff, lifting crates, fetching water, cleaning equipment, anything that kept him near Anna. Soldiers joked that he had become the nurse's shadow, though their teasing held no malice. It was rare, in that bleak time, to see someone smile. One evening, after a long day of receiving wounded from the front line, Anna quietly whispered, "Come with me. I need help with something delicate." Her tone was cautious, almost fearful. Mikhail followed her behind the medical tents, past the supply depot, to an abandoned barn the army had deemed unusable. Anna pressed her finger to her lips. "Please, be silent." She opened the door just enough for Mikhail to slip in. Inside, in the shadows between broken beams and crates, were 4 civilians, a German mother, 2 small children, and an elderly man with shaking hands. Their faces were pale with hunger, their clothes torn from days of hiding. Mikhail's breath caught. "Who are they?" "Refugees," Anna whispered. "They escaped the fighting. They're innocent. If the wrong officer discovers them—" She didn't finish the sentence. Mikhail knew what happened to unregistered civilians found in restricted areas. "You've been feeding them?" he asked. "Yes, with food I shouldn't be giving. And medicine. They're sick. The little one has a fever." Her eyes trembled, not fear for herself, but for them. Mikhail knelt beside the children, offering a comforting smile. He took out his own ration bread and broke it into small pieces. "Here," he whispered, "eat slowly." Anna stared at him, as if seeing him for the first time all over again. "You're risking everything," she said softly. "So are you," he replied. A silent understanding passed between them. Not just compassion, something deeper, something fragile and dangerous in a world torn to pieces. From that night on, Mikhail visited the barn every evening. He brought potatoes, blankets, bits of firewood. He kept watch while Anna tended to the elderly man's cough. One night, after the refugees finally fell asleep, Anna stood close to Mikhail beneath the ghostly moonlight. "You are kinder than this war deserves," she whispered. He wanted to tell her everything, how she gave him strength, how her voice quieted the noise inside him. But soldiers did not confess such things. They simply stood together in the cold, letting silence speak for them. The next morning, everything changed. Mikhail was called to the command tent. Captain Sokolov, a stern man with tired eyes, handed him a folded paper. "Arsentiev, you've been reassigned." Mikhail felt his stomach drop. "To where?" "Hungary," the captain said. "Southern front. The fighting is heavy. We need all able men." It felt like ice water poured down Mikhail's spine. He stormed out of the tent and ran to the hospital, heart pounding. Anna was cleaning surgical instruments when he burst in. "What happened?" she gasped. "They're sending me south, today." Her hands trembled. "No, no, you're not ready. You still have headaches. It doesn't matter," he said. "Orders are orders." She stepped closer, eyes wet. "I don't want you to go. Neither do I." For a moment, the whole war seemed to vanish. There were no guns, no commanders, no borders. Just two people trapped in a moment too small for what they felt. Anna removed a small blue ribbon from her apron. Simple, worn, but precious. "When you survive," she said, tying it around his wrist, "bring this back to me." He swallowed hard. "I will." Then, for the first and last time, she pulled him into an embrace. It was brief, trembling, filled with all the words neither dared to speak. Minutes later, Mikhail marched away with his unit. He did not look back, because if he did, his legs might refuse to move. But he felt the ribbon against his skin with every step, and he made a promise to himself. "I will return no matter what. I will return to her." Hungary was a different kind of hell. The forests of East Prussia had been cold and silent, but Hungary was mud, rain, ruined city streets, and fire. Buildings collapsed under artillery, tanks rolled across shattered pavement, and the smell of burning trenches never left the air. Mikhail's unit fought battle after battle in conditions that defied sanity. He trudged through knee-deep mud, slept inside craters filled with freezing rain, and advanced through streets lined with rubble where snipers lurked behind every shattered window. He saw comrades fall, boys no older than himself. He carried wounded soldiers across open streets under fire. He learned to ignore hunger, thirst, exhaustion. But at night, when the world finally quieted, he lay awake staring at the sky. He touched the blue ribbon tied around his wrist and whispered Anna's name into the smoke-filled night. During the siege of Budapest, Mikhail displayed courage that even seasoned officers noticed. He dragged 2 injured soldiers from a collapsing building during a massive artillery strike. He led a small team through enemy-occupied streets to rescue a pinned-down scout unit. He refused to abandon anyone, even when ordered to retreat. For these actions, he was promoted, first to corporal, then sergeant, within weeks. But each promotion felt hollow, because courage meant nothing if the person he wanted to share it with was hundreds of miles away. One freezing night, after the city finally quieted, Mikhail sat alone beside a ruined fountain. Snow drifted into the empty basin like ash. He held the ribbon and murmured, "Anna, wait for me, please." He hoped the wind carried his words somewhere she could hear. But the war was far from over, and fate had more trials in store. Spring of 1945 arrived like a rumor. Whispers spread through every front line. The Germans are collapsing. Berlin is surrounded. The war is almost over. But for Mikhail, peace came with no comfort. Because with every victory, the army pushed onward, deeper, faster, toward Berlin, toward the final blow. And then, one morning, fate twisted the knife. A courier arrived with a sealed envelope. The ink on the orders was still wet. Mikhail read them once, twice. His throat tightened. Reassignment. Again. This time to the northern front, near the Baltic coast, where pockets of resistance still held out. He was to report immediately. His unit congratulated him. They said northern postings were easier, safer, a good place to finish the war. But Mikhail felt none of it. He had been so close. Hungary was not that far from East Prussia. If he had just one free day, one chance, he might have found Anna, might have seen her face again before the final battle swallowed them. But the war didn't bend for love. Within hours, he was loaded onto a transport truck with 20 other soldiers and driven north, through bombed villages, across rivers choked with debris, through forests greening with the first signs of spring. At a rest stop, Mikhail found a quiet moment behind a ruined wall. He pulled out the blue ribbon, now frayed at the edges. "Anna," he whispered to the wind, "the war is ending. Hold on, I'll find you when it's over." For the first time, he wondered, would she still be there? Would the hospital remain standing? Would she have survived the last brutal months? He pressed the ribbon to his lips. Above him, dark clouds gathered. The war was ending, but his search was only beginning.
Mikhail reached the northern front just as the final German forces surrendered. There were no more tanks roaring across fields, no more artillery lighting the sky. Only ruins, silence, and the strange, hollow quiet of a world that had forgotten how to breathe. People called it victory, but for Mikhail it felt like standing at the edge of an empty field where something precious had been buried. He was promoted again, this time to junior lieutenant for bravery, leadership, and surviving more battles than any boy of 16 ever should. But medals didn't warm an empty heart. He applied for permission to return south to the hospital where he last saw Anna. The request returned, denied. Military zones were sealed, movements restricted. Germany was being divided, reorganized, controlled. Rumors drifted through the camp. German medical staff are being relocated. Some are sent to Soviet-controlled Berlin, some to military hospitals in eastern Germany. Some are deported. Every rumor was a knife. One night, sitting alone beside the campfire, Mikhail opened his coat, pulled out the ribbon, and held it over the flames, watching them dance across its edges. I won't give up. I swear it. But the world was changing faster than he could chase it. The letter sat on Mikhail's desk like a live heart, beating with memories he thought time had buried. He read it again, and every time the same line tore at him. "She has looked for you for many years." His office was quiet, too quiet. The walls were lined with medals, maps, documents, portraits of generals and leaders he had served with, but none of it meant anything now. For 25 years, he had conquered battlefields, rebuilt regions, commanded thousands, but none of that filled the empty space inside him. He stood slowly, gripping the edge of the desk to steady himself. Outside his window lay a peaceful city, rebuilt from the ashes of a war that had stolen so many lives. People walked, children laughed, buses rumbled along the streets. Life had moved on. And yet here he was, feeling 16 again, feeling the same boy who lay in a military hospital beside a German nurse with gentle hands and eyes that saw who he really was. He folded the letter carefully, as if it were made of fragile glass. There was no hesitation, no doubt. For the first time in decades, he felt the world tilt in the right direction. He packed his things, a uniform, a coat, and the blue ribbon faded to the color of a winter sky. As he closed his suitcase, he whispered to the empty room, "Anna, wait for me. I'm coming this time, and nothing will stop me." Travel papers for a Soviet general were easy to acquire, but emotionally, the trip felt impossible. The journey took him through the same roads he once crossed as a boy soldier. He rode trains past fields where tanks once burned, through forests where he had hid from machine gun fire, past villages he'd helped liberate, hospitals he'd been treated in, river crossings he'd almost died at. Every mile felt like a memory rising from the grave. He passed Budapest, where he had met Anna. He paused for one night, unable to resist. The hospital was rebuilt now, larger, modern, alive. But the hill behind it was the same. The place where Anna had given him the ribbon, unchanged. He climbed it at sunset, every step heavier with emotion. As he stood at the top, wind brushing the grass, he closed his eyes and whispered, "I kept my promise. I looked for you. All these years." He stayed until the sun disappeared behind the hills. Then he boarded the train again. Toward East Germany. Toward the woman who had waited a lifetime. Toward the part of his soul he never stopped searching for. The town where Anna lived now was a quiet place, filled with gardens, old stone houses, and the soft ringing of bicycle bells. Everyone he spoke to knew her. "Ah, Frau Anna, the nurse? Yes, she's been here many years. She helps everyone. She's a good soul." Mikhail's heart pounded with each word. They told him she had never married, that she kept to herself, that she spent her free time helping orphan children and war widows, that she still wore a small blue ribbon tied inside her medical bag. When Mikhail heard that, he had to sit down. All these years, she had held on to it too. They said she lived in a small apartment next to the hospital. Second floor, white curtains, a flower box with faded violets. He approached the building slowly, afraid that if he walked too quickly, reality might shatter. At the door, he hesitated. His hand hovered above the railing. 25 years of waiting, 25 years of searching, 25 years of imagining this moment. And now he was steps away. He took a deep breath and climbed. Each stair creaked softly under his boots. The hallway smelled of old wood and soap. A clock ticked somewhere far away. He reached her door. Apartment 21. The same number as the hospital tent where they had first met. His vision blurred for a moment. Fate had never been so poetic. He raised his hand and knocked. Mikhail's knuckles barely touched the wood before he froze. What if she wasn't home? What if she didn't remember him? What if time had erased what he carried in his chest for 25 long years? He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and knocked again. Soft footsteps approached from the other side. The door opened, and there she stood, Anna. Her hair, now streaked with silver, was tied back in the same simple braid she wore during the war. Her eyes, those gentle brown eyes he had seen in nightmares and dreams, widened in disbelief. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stared, as if trying to confirm the other wasn't a ghost. "Mikhail!" she whispered, voice trembling. He nodded, unable to speak. The years fell away from both of them like dust shaken from an old coat. Anna lifted a shaking hand to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes instantly, tears she had held back for decades. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the ribbon, faded, frayed, but whole. Her knees buckled and she pressed a hand to the doorframe to keep herself standing. "You kept it," she said, her voice breaking. "I kept you," he whispered. And then, after 25 years, Anna stepped forward and embraced him. Not gently, not politely, but with the force of a woman grabbing back the piece of life stolen from her. They held each other in the hallway for a long time, the world forgotten. Inside her small apartment, time felt suspended. Anna poured tea with trembling hands, the cups clinking softly. They sat across from each other at a wooden table worn smooth by years of use. For a long moment, they couldn't speak, just stared, memorizing the faces they had lost. Then Anna told her story. After the war, Soviet officers transferred her to East Germany to work in a military hospital. She waited for Mikhail for months, then years. She wrote letters, dozens, hundreds, but none reached him. Most were returned stamped undeliverable. Others disappeared into the chaos of bureaucracy. She searched military records. She asked veterans. She traveled to villages where she heard his unit had passed. And when she found nothing, she feared the worst. That you had died, or forgotten me, or that I had been foolish to hope. Mikhail listened, unable to take his eyes off her. Then it was his turn. He told her about the battles, the transfers, the lost hospitals, the endless rumors about displaced nurses. He spoke of the ribbon, how it lived in his pocket through every winter, every promotion, every moment he wanted to give up. He told her how he tried to find her name in archives, lists, medical rosters, always a step behind. Anna reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "We survived everything but time," she said softly, "and even that didn't win." They walked through the town at dusk, side by side, the way they should have walked decades earlier. Children played in the streets, old men smoked pipes on benches, bicycles rattled along cobblestone roads. Life. Real, peaceful life. Mikhail felt something unfamiliar blooming in his chest. Quiet happiness. They stopped at a small river that reflected the setting sun. Anna looked up at him. "Do you ever regret anything?" she asked. "Yes," he said honestly, "that I didn't find you sooner." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "Then we share the same regret." He took her hand. Older now, lined with years of work, yet still the warmest hand he had ever known. And in that moment, The world felt right. Mikhail stayed in East Germany for months, then returned regularly even after his duties pulled him back to his homeland. He visited Anna every holiday, every spring, every moment he could. They rebuilt their lives together, not rushed, not desperate, but with the patient, steady love of two people who had known loss too deeply. They traveled to the old hospital site in Hungary years later. There, on the same hill where she had once tied the ribbon into his uniform, Mikhail knelt and placed a new one, bright blue, untouched by war, into her hands. "For the years we lost," he said, "and for the years we have." Anna tied it around his wrist and kissed it softly. "This time," she whispered, "we won't lose each other." And they never did. Two lives separated by war, united by a ribbon, held together by a promise stronger than time.